Greetings, people of the grammatical gender. I'm here today because I'm supposed to be outside cutting up the trees I took down into logs for my neighbor. He said he'd take them for free, but I'm too lazy and too tired. If I live 2 more weeks, I'll be 68, and I'm getting tired. I don't mind working. I enjoy it, but I'm just getting tired. You get to a certain age and you slow down. Anyway, I'd like to continue in my short series of videos and talk about my innovation called the Amplified Verb Tense. I've been working on this for forever. And in previous videos, I showed you that I took the 4 traditional or contemporary tense groups, okay, and I changed the name. Under my system, I have 4 different tense groups. All right, I showed you that. And I also talked about auxiliary verbs or helping verbs. And I talked about how I took the traditional auxiliaries or helping verbs and I classified them thoroughly. I did a video on that. I talked about how I came up with what I call affirming auxiliaries, aggregating auxiliaries, and conditioning auxiliaries. In other words, I classified them succinctly and I put them in a spot where I think they're most readily understood and useful. Okay, now if we continue on, we look at the 4 tense groups that I have renamed: basic, transpired, extensional, and transpired extensional. Now I know right away, instantly, the viewer out there will say, well, those are goofy terms. Why would you pick goofy terms? Well, if you think about it, and I have for over 30 years, I couldn't find terms that were any better. I couldn't find anything more succinct. So here I have the basic and traditional, that would be simple and traditional. Then I have transpired, which would be traditionally called perfect. And here's progressive, the traditional progressive I call extensional. Then the perfect progressive I call transpired extensional. And of course, in each group, you have your action time indicators. And I call my 3 action time indicators current, past, and future. Whereas traditionally, you would see present, past, and future. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But these are your action time indicators. They take your tense group, okay, which gives you kind of an idea of tense, and then your action time indicators more precisely convey to you the tense or the time of the action of the verb, okay? Now, if we look at my 4 seemingly goofy names, all right, we look at them, all 4 of them, and we study them a little bit. Let me briefly go over this with you. I chose the term basic because basic is defined as serving as a starting point. In other words, your basic tense group starts with your verb base form, which I talked about in one of my first videos in this series, okay? In other words, the basic tense group starts with the verb base form, the basic form of the verb that you can have. Now, simple, the word simple is defined as constituting a basic element, or you could say fundamental, or you could say readily understood. Well, that would apply to many, many terms. So I chose ultimately basic for my first tense group, okay? Now the word transpired in traditional, the tense group would be called perfect. And the word transpire defined can mean occur, take place, or happen. Now the word perfect, which is traditionally used, all right, comes from the Latin word perfectus, which means completed. So I found a problem. When you have a tense such as the perfect progressive, all right, in traditional, you would be in essence saying the tense is called completed continuous. In other words, perfect progressive would translate as completed continuous. Well, that's a contradiction. Completed continuous. So I found that the word transpired, in other words, happened or occurred, is a little bit more sensible, a little bit easier to understand. Okay? Now for the tense group extensional, all right, the traditional term was progressive. We find the word extensional defined as marked by extension or being extended. And the definition of extension is the total range over which something extends. In other words, in my extensional tense group, the action of the verb is extended to some degree or in some manner. It's that simple. The action of the verb is extended to some degree or in some manner. So I thought about this for ages, and I thought, you know what, I like this term, I'm going to use it. Now the fourth tense group, transpired extensional. The traditional term for that tense group was perfect progressive, and as I mentioned already several times, it's kind of contradictory. Okay? So when I say the tense group is transpired extensional, what we're saying here is, in my system, is, okay, something happened, but it will continue to happen. Or something happened and it continued to a certain point. Or something happened and we anticipate the continuance of the action. Okay? I know these sound goofy initially, but if you think about it, over time you'll say, you know what, it's pretty good choice of terms. And I thought about this for a long, long time. And I do these goofy videos, and I don't get many views, but between my music ideas and my grammar ideas, they're actually quite good. And I think over time, at some point, if somebody stumbles onto them, they'll say, you know, these are really, really concise terms and perspectives, and I think they'll be adopted by the viewers, but time will tell. Now, the action time indicators, okay? Now, I mentioned that we have the four main tense groups, okay? We just talked about them. But to make, or to give and impart a sense of tense and time, you need to be more precise. So we use what I call action time indicators, right? Now we're going to talk about that in detail. In the contemporary and traditional setup, the one you're used to for the past hundreds of years, the action time indicators are referred to as present, past, and future, okay? I have named mine current, past, and future. The only change is, instead of present, I say current. And once again, we have to go to definitions to see why we would change it. Present, the word present, can be defined as meaning now, at the moment of speech, or now existing or in progress. Okay? Now the word, the word current is defined as occurring in, existing at, or belonging in the present time, or you could say presently or recently. So you see, the word current can be felt, and it can be imagined as a broader term. It gives a little bit more leeway in thinking of time, whereas present is a tighter term. I feel it's a tighter, more restrictive term. So I went with current to give us a little bit of space when it comes to tense in the current sense. In other words, happening as we speak or kind of around the time of our speaking, okay? Now, you say, well, Joey, I was paying attention and I noticed something. Well, maybe you did. You might say, well, you know what? You changed the term present to current, and why didn't you change the term past to transpired? The transpired, the tense group. why didn't we use the word transpired here to give us that broader range, just like you did with the word current? And I say, well, here's the problem. If you change the action time indicator past, if you change it to the word transpired, and then you have a problem, because you could have a tense that's named the transpired. In other words, here's your tense group, and here's your action time indicator. So you see, instead of the word past here, you would have the double term transpired. You understand? And that would be goofy. In other words, your tense group would be transpired in my system, but your action time indicator, instead of past, the traditional, would be another transpired. So you would just have, it's just too goofy. So I chose to keep the word past, all right, from the traditional setup, and I kept it in my system. So we have current, past, and future. Now, I mentioned that my goals were to thoroughly discuss the verb-based form and how it's used in the traditional simple present tense, or it would be called my basic current tense, all right? I talked about the auxiliaries. We already went over that. I talked about the traditional perfect progressive, which in my system would be the transpired extensional. I already talked about that, how you form it. And I just introduced new names and my new perspective. So the last thing I have to do is, and you're saying thank God, is tense realization. I'll go over some sample sentences using the different tense groups and the different action time indicators, and I think it'll make more sense. But the whole idea is to send these ideas out and to see if they're embraced. It could take 10, 20, 30 years. It doesn't matter, because I'll be dead and long gone. But ideas sometimes are good things. And you don't want to live your whole life and not have any ideas. You want to, I think you would want to contribute and say, hey, you know what, I lived 60, 70, 80 years, and I have this idea, and you know you're going to die, and you want to leave it with your children or your friends, and because it might be good. It might be carried into the future, and you've made a contribution. You didn't sit around and drink beer and waste your life. Anyway, the point is, that's it for now. We'll come back with one or two more and wrap it up, and I'll stop boring you with this goofy topic. Thank you, and good night.